Any restorer who has some knowledge of the turn of the century farm machinery will recognise the name Lance Bulldog. This machine was, to say the least, unusual in its appearance. The huge flywheel and coffee percolator shaped exhaust, along with the square body lines and cylinder head protruding forward of the front axle, would become the visual differentiation that people would quote to separate the Lance from other period machines. The Marshall Company, based in Gainsborough, England, were at that period of time Britain's leading boiler makers. The company itself was based on the improve and exploit policy as opposed to being single product orientated. That is to say that they would very often acquire industrial machines of all sorts and improve them, then remarket them. They also subcontracted to their competition, making boilers and casting machinery parts for their own foundries. Good evening, everybody, or good morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world, and you're very welcome back to the channel. Yes, it's great to be back in front of the camera, talking to everybody again after a little bit of break over the last couple of weeks. And I would like to say a huge thank you to everybody who contacted me, who texted and who called, and indeed who came to pay their respects at my grandmother's funeral. Yeah, it's been a very, very tough couple of weeks. It did come as a little bit of a shock, even though we were kind of half expecting it to happen. But look at 101 years of age, nobody's going to have any complaints. And it was a celebration of a great life, of a great woman who was farming for all of her life, all of her 101 years. She was farming. And she left a great legacy. So thanks a million to everybody. And that is the reason why I have been off the screens for the last couple of weeks. But I'm back with a bang now. And just maybe some of you did recognize that last week I was on sort of a podcast type interview situation with the famous Flying Fergie man for his cockpit cast, as he calls it, all in aid of the air ambulance up in Northern Ireland. So we just went for a little flight, had a little bit of a chat, and that video was up on his channel last weekend. So I will drop a link in the comments below. There is a link in the comments if anybody wants to check it out. Just a little bit of a chat, a little bit of banter about this, that, and the other, as the fella says. It was good crack, and I'd like to thank Cathal very much for inviting me up to take part in it. And he will have a few other, as I says, more famous names, obviously, than me up in the next coming months or whenever the weather improves, that he can get people up in the air again. But thanks a million for that. So if anybody wants to tune in, go and take a look at it. But today, this video is all about a simple little tractor, the Field Marshal, kind of follow on from. Now, I've done a video on the Field Marshal, on Marshall itself, the Marshall tractors. I've done obviously Leyland as well, but this is a quirky little a tractor, a little famous tractor from the 1940s, something around 1940s. As we get through the text on it, I will have a little bit more detail. So it's just a short video about that, a little bit of history. I know there's a lot of people in the UK who watch this, and they will appreciate a video on the Field Marshal. And to everybody who tuned in on my last video, on the Perkins engine, which I threw together literally in 2 hours, but it got nearly 25,000 views so far. Thank you so very much. It was a video that wasn't supposed to go out, but it did go out, and I'm glad it did. And thank you to everyone and all the new subscribers. I think I got something like 400 new subscribers out of that video alone. So thank you so much to everybody, and all my new subscribers, you're all very welcome. So without further ado, we'll move on with the Field Marshal and this evening's little history lesson. So up until the 1920s, steam engines ruled supreme, Marshalls turning out a large percentage of steam tractors known as ploughing engines, as can be seen in the photograph. However, the introduction of the internal combustion engine in farm machinery and the onslaught of the economic depression saw a great decline for demand of such large and heavy machines. In true Marshall tradition, the company put forward an application to the Lance Company to produce their Bulldog machines from the Britannia Works. However, it was an application that would be rejected, as Clayton and Shuttleworth were able to produce the HSCS. In order to beat the economic recession, and probably not to be beaten, Marshalls acquired both models of the available Lands machine, which arrived at the Britannia Works and were dismantled, and preamble to the new venture. And a lot of credit to Anthony West at Yesterday's Tractors for a lot of the research that has gone into this video. A lot of it is his text, so I'd like to credit Anthony West with that. From the very outset, though, it was the Marshall Company's intention to improve the design of the Lands. The Marshall concept, however, was to be a full diesel machine. While surface ignition engines would run on almost anything one could lay one's hands on, the Marshall would require a supply of fuel oil. Although this was initially thought to be a drawback to design, diesel at 6 shillings per gallon would ultimately prove its major advantage. By 1930, the Field Marshal machine was attending agricultural shows and was tagged as the 1530 Model E, a single-cylinder engine of 8-inch bore by 10.5-inch stroke running at 550 RPM using crankcase compression at a compression ratio of 15.5 to 8.1 formed the forward part of the frame with the gearbox and axle housing to the rear. Unlike many of its contemporaries, which required a hot bulb for starting and running, the 1530 was started using ignition paper placed in a holder which protruded from the combustion chamber. Another useful feature was the fitting of the radiator in the normal transverse position, the fan being driven by a skew gear. 3 forward and 1 reverse gears were provided, and the whole thing weighed in at 70,000 pounds. Sorry, that should be 7,000 pounds. The 1530 was to prove to be a competitive machine. It wasn't without its faults, though. The weakest point most noticed were the clutch release mechanism, gear selector, and leather seals, not forgetting the injector system. Initially, the 15s were constructed in line with the company tradition. That is to say that each machine was an individual of the customer, so no two were alike. If the customer wanted red, white, and blue wheels, then that's what he got. As nice as it may have seemed, there are hardly any records appertaining to these early machines, so information is at best sketchy. After a period of time, the world saw the release of the revised model tagged the 1830. Noticeable changes were that the square axles were dropped, thinner steel was used to save weight and reduce cost, the rear transmission housings were strengthened, and the fuel problem was resolved by the use of a Bosch injector unit and injectors. The 1830 was, at best, heavy. It was cumbersome 3.5 tons and was too heavy really for many jobs where direct haulage or implements were involved. As a stationary power unit, though, it was undisputed. And to everyone out there who watches regularly, who has gotten this far in the video, I am going to pose a little question just for Christmas, because it's Christmas, and I will have a copy of January's edition of Classic Tractor in the post to the person that can answer this question. Yes, that question is, the Field Marshal Mark I tractor was produced from 1945 to 1947. And what I want to answer is, what was the list price of that tractor at the time? Now, I'll take the answer in pound sterlings. So that was, its currency at the time of its country of production. So a little bit of Googling and you will find it relatively easy. So what was the price of the Mark I Field Marshal that was produced from 1945 to 1947? What was the list price of that? The first one with the correct answer will win a copy of this January's Classic Tractor magazine, and maybe something else thrown in along with it. Okay. By 1934, the British-built Fordson was readily available at only £155, as opposed to the £310 for the Marshall. Now, this is not the Mark I. The Marshall team had to come up with a suitable alternative to meet the market, and thus the 1220 was born. The 1220 had been modified so that the engine was now a 6.5 8-inch bore by 9-inch stroke. A design was to prove so popular and reliable it will continue for the next 22 years unchanged. Pneumatic tyres, as opposed to steels and cleats, were now also available to cater for popular demand. The 1220 continued production for the next 4 years and was then renamed the M. This saw further refinements to the gearbox and engine castings. The M was in reality at the limit of the power output for a single-cylinder engine. If failings in the structure were not to be incurred through stresses, however, the single engine was so popular that most war attempts were made to take the same engine to 50 horsepower in an attempt to compete with multi-cylinder engines. Towards the end of the war, decisions had to be taken as to what shape the diesel tractor would take in the future. Following a new marketing policy within the Marshall Company, each product group had a name, e.g. Road Marshall for road marking equipment, thus Field Marshal was adopted for wheeled tractor range. The new high-powered British diesel tractor, the Field Marshal Series 1, was announced in an appearance more modern machine than the M, but this cosmetic treatment was only in line with the current trend to hide the working parts with styled sheet metal. The engine was basically the same, but the speed increased from 700 to 750 RPM. Provisions for power starting were also made by modifying the cylinder head to allow the use of a starting cartridge. The driving position was raised, and the winch was secreted below the floor panel. The exhaust was also modified, but now looked even more like a coffee percolator than before. Additional braking equipment was now also available, as was the variety of driver protection in the form of canvas or pressed tin canopies. The format was still and would continue to be very successful, so much so that the Series 1 was further modified to become the Series 2, and later still the Series 3 and 3A, and up until 1957. The most asked question by restorers new to Field Marshals is how to differentiate between the two models. The Model M is basically a Land Bulldog in all but name. The livery is a standard fern green with red cast wheels or steels. The front is a very square, and the exhaust best described as squat pressed cooker shape. The Series 1 is easily discernible by the snub nose on the front and lack of the bulbous air cleaner on the bonnet. It also has the later, taller coffee percolator type exhaust. Early Series 1s shared M wheel centres, whilst the later ones had pressed steel centres and half-flat shaft ends. The Series 2, whilst being the same fern green, was turned out with pressed steel wheels, which were silver in colour. The addition of the bulbous air cleaner to the top of the bonnet was another differentiating feature. The Series 3 was altogether a taller machine, and even if fern green paint, it cannot be mistaken for the Series 1 and the Series 2. This machine was turned out in bright orange and silver livery, and this machine had a more pronounced hopping effect when on takeover. Field Marshal tractors were commonly used to pull agricultural machinery, such as threshing machines, from site to site. Once in place, the Field Marshal would be used as the power plant for the threshing machine. Tractor's belt pulley coupled by a large flat belt to the threshing machine's pulley. Field Marshals with tracks were produced under the Fowler brand name, be converted into the Fowler the Fowler factory at Leeds. The first were designated the Fowler VF, later ones the VFA. So later the two firms would be drawn together, and a large number of complicated takeovers by such firms as British Leyland led to the wheel tractor concern being owned by Bentel Simplex in the early 1980s. And this is a company that we've spoken about before in our Leyland videos. They brought with the company to the whole Leyland wheel tractor range, which had previously been built at Bathgate, which itself has started out obviously as the Nuffield Universal Tractor site. They were then badged, engineered into the Marshall range. The company even designed and built some totally new tractors, but unfortunately, due to high costs and subsequent high asking prices, the tractor didn't sell very well, and the company slipped under. In the end, only the Track Marshall concern was left, although even this has since gone bankrupt. In the 1970s, about 700 Track Marshall tractors were imported into Australia and fitted with dozer blades. These machines were powered by a four-cylinder Perkins diesel engine and were considered very reliable in their time. They steered through an unusual wet band brake system through a differential gear. This is known as controlled differential. It is impossible to stop one track. You pull the brake lever, the track slows down and the other speeds up. This type of steering system absorbs a lot of power when turning, but several of these machines are still in use around northern rivers in the area of New South Wales in Australia. And that is where I'm going to leave it for today. So yeah, if you got to the end of the video, thank you very much. Don't forget, if you have found out the answer to the question, please drop it into the comments. And if you do, as I always ask, if you have driven one, Field Marshal, if you own one, if you worked on them, if you know anything more about them, that you would like to share with our viewers in the comments and share with myself, I would really, really appreciate it. If you like the video, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. And I will make a promise to everyone that the more support I get, the more subscribers I get, the more likes I get, and the more views I get, will give us so much encouragement to make even better and better content as 2025 rolls in. So without saying any more, I'd just like to wish everyone a very happy Christmas and a happy New Year. I should have a video out before the New Year, but have a safe and happy Christmas. Stay at home, put your feet up in front of the fire, take a drop of whiskey and just chill out. That's what I plan on doing. So it's been a good year. Thank you so much for everyone that watched, everyone that subscribed, all the comments and all the encouragement from everybody throughout the year. So that's it. I will talk to everybody soon. Thanks for watching.